Gentlemen,
Hello, hello.
it's been a long time coming,
I know.
right? So this is a transition that I think a lot of people in Web3 or that in the blockchain ecosystem have been talking about for some time, dreaming about in some cases. They don't even sleep, right? They're thinking about solutions to these problems. I know that you two, that might describe you a little bit. So let's talk a little bit by way of introductions. I'd like you to introduce yourself and your project and what problems you aim to solve with your project. Let's, if it's all right, start with Josh and then finish with Greg.
I'm Joshua Noble. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Filebase. We are we're not a token, we're not a coin, we're not a blockchain, to be clear. We are a layer 2 solutions provider that sits on top of multiple decentralized storage networks. We're trying to put data on Zia network, IPFS, working with NFTs, soon to be Filecoin and Arweave. We make that process really easy for you. No technical hoops to jump through.
My name is Greg. I'm the CEO and founder for Overclock Labs. We created Akash Network. So Akash is the world's first decentralized supercloud. So it's essentially a marketplace where you can acquire, one can acquire unused capacity, and if you have unused capacity in your data center, you can provide that. The goal really is to decentralize cloud deployment, right? What that means is avoid vendor lock-in and be able to leverage the most optimal pricing and do so in a censorship-resistant and open setting. Currently, Akash serves about, I would say, 25 to 30% of Cosmos ecosystem, and now a lot of our users tend to be in Web3 because it's very aligned. But now we're slowly reading into machine learning, and where GPU cost on Akash is significantly lower than what you would otherwise pay. So we're very excited. The problems we're trying to solve is really get to true price of computing and really solve the censorship attacks that you have that's been increasing lately for computing.
Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about sort of in broad strokes. The industry has taken a hit by way of regulation, in some cases seeking clarity in terms of regulation. And I know this has been one of the biggest pain points that a lot of projects this year have faced. Without getting political, I know it's a bit of a minefield, without getting political, ESG and decentralization. Some people would set that up as a little bit of an opposition. I think it's probably an opportunity as well, but from your point of view, is decentralized cloud in any way at odds with this? And I mean, if you don't think so, why not? If you think it is, then let's talk about solutions in a minute.
Odds with it? No, I think it's very aligned with the goals of ESG, right? So like, if you think about what Akash is inward looking. That means anyone that has capacity that's not being used, it's already burning carbon, so why not sell that capacity? It's about improving efficiency of underutilized resources. So it's inherently better for the planet, right? Whereas most commercial cloud providers are external, they're expansionary. So they look to acquire more compute, more chips and whatnot. So it's not odds, it's actually very aligned with the ESG and the value set of that. From a regulatory standpoint, yes, there's quite a lot of attention on proof of work, and there is very little attention or even education, as a matter of fact, on anything that's not proof of work, for rightfully so, because there's just so much money involved there. But as people get more, as we start seeing a lot of use cases, like one of the recent use cases for Akash was with the US Department of Defense, using Akash network to secure group communications. So when people start seeing some of these advanced use cases used by the government, I think the government and regulators will have a different opinion on how Akash is used and how Web3 is considered in terms of regulatory sphere.
Okay, awesome. So you're already seeing a bit of that really great alignment then in your business.
Yes, we're seeing government using Akash. We're seeing non-Web3, non-crypto folks using Akash. There's even an argument about how Akash is going to make America more competitive when it comes to machine learning by enabling and unlocking this inherently unused resources. So, it's great for the country. So there's this whole notion and the narrative that's building up, saying that Web3 is actually used to secure our borders and and secure America's position in the world as a leader.
Okay, awesome. That's great to hear that you're finding opportunities there. Joshua, how about for Firebase?
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of what Greg just said. I think governance is something that's always going to be present in society with governments around the world. I think one thing that's really a unique trait about decentralization, whether it's on the compute side or the storage side, this is a worldwide thing, right? And so it's not just a case of, the U.S. government, controlling or trying to oversee decentralized storage or compute. It's a worldwide thing, and governments talk to each other, of course. But when it comes to governance and decentralization, anybody can spin up an Akash node. Anybody can spin up a SIA node or an IPFS node. And so, the ability to leverage the underutilized capacity, like Greg said, on the storage side is also very present. And we've seen everybody from small individual hobbyists who have massive network-attached storage devices in their basement, all the way up to enterprise-level data center providers who have storage capacity online running, needs to be available for their own forecasting of their own customers, but they'd like to also get something for it while it sits idle. And so I think across the world, bringing all these folks together and uniting them, I think is pretty powerful. And I think there will be some level of governance, maybe on a per-country basis over time, mostly in regards to safeguards and malicious content, of course. But I think at its core, decentralization really kind of unites everybody together.
Awesome. Let's talk about a little bit of pain. So you talked about some of the aims of your projects. Talk about the history till this point. What would you say have been the biggest pain points that you've had to address in order to get to the current working state of your platforms and of your projects?
Well, so
I know it's a broad question.
There's so many pain points, right? Like, the biggest, most obvious was scalability for us. Historically, Akash began working on the product like 7 years ago, right? And we really started putting the Web3 and the blockchain sphere maybe 5 years ago, like 2017 timeframe. So the options to build a blockchain were very limited. It was Ethereum only, and we built on Ethereum and it failed miserably. I mean, CryptoKitties launched with 40,000 users and took down the entire network. So Ethereum was not the ideal platform to launch a decentralized cloud that's supposed to solve scalability, right? So we have to go build our own L1, and that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And so we chose Cosmos, and I mean, this was before Cosmos existed, but so we went with Tendermint, and Tendermint had its own set of like issues, just in terms of readiness. It's very early, and then just lack of technology to build a layer one was a big hurdle. And now we have a full working product, and we have product market fit and whatnot. Now big challenge is engagement, right? Just lack of engagement infrastructure. Like, there's lack of emails, there's lack of messaging, there's a lot of like traditional tooling that Web 2 developers are used to that don't exist in a Web 3. I mean, there's not even credit cards, right? So even with all these limitations, we are able to see quite a lot of adoption, quite a lot of interest, and that speaks volumes in terms of value that we provide. So we're not too worried. I mean, this is a time game. It just, we keep solving the problems. And a lot of times when we solve problems, we're actually solving upstream problems, in the sense like we recently introduced IP addresses in Akash network. I mean, this seems to me like a small problem, but there was no way, actually, if you think about it, to create an IP address marketplace before Akash, right? So, and we introduced storage, block storage, which there's no generic solution to attach block storage, right? So we had to invent a lot of like new ways to do things, and now we're doing GPUs. GPUs, there's no open market for GPUs. We're actually inventing, and we're contributing to the Kubernetes of the world, right? So technology is not anywhere close to ready in terms of like what we can deliver, but just chugging along and delivering those things, and then the moving away from core technology to the engagement infrastructure, I think is very, very challenging. And that's where people tend to take shortcuts with Web 2.5, but doing it truly decentralized is very, very, very hard. Like truly non-custodial without taking shortcuts, right? So, and that's always a balance that we have to face.
Awesome. So it sounds like in your case, I mean, there's always the analogy of building the plane mid-flight, but it sounds like in the case of Akash, that's very applicable.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Joshua, how about for Firebase? What's some big pain points?
Yeah, there's a lot of challenges building for enterprise scale, like we try to do at Firebase. Probably one of the biggest challenges is, for us at least, dealing with data. Finding a data center provider or partner really that could deal with the gigabits and terabits of capacity for bandwidth utilization that we actually needed, right? Whether it's to send data, receive data, processing billions of files. It's not an easy task necessarily when it's going across the internet, each individual request one at a time. Evangelism is probably another big challenge, and this really spans not just for Firebase, but I'm sure for Akash and other platforms as well. Teaching people about how these things work. I mean, not a day goes by where we get 20, 30 potential users of Firebase who think they can just upload to IPFS and they think it's free and it'll live forever, and that's not always the case, right? I mean, somebody's always paying. That data lives somewhere, and so teaching people where that data lives, how long it lives there for, and then how they can retrieve that data. We spent a lot of time on it, and so we do that through blog posts, documentation. We've done a couple videos, of course, as well. But really taking these concepts that have been around forever, compute and storage, and putting them into a Web3 ecosystem, or candy wrapper, as we sometimes like to say. These concepts have been around for a long time, but having to explain how they work in this new Web3 world has its challenges at its time. And so I would say those are probably the two biggest things for me.
Awesome. Okay, so it sounds like you're still having to educate your users that the decentralized cloud is still somebody else's computer. That hasn't changed.
That has not changed. That is still very much the case.
Okay, awesome. So simple user onboarding sounds like.
And also, to be intellectually honest, this from education standpoint, right? People, when something is broken, like when Hetzner, banned Solana, they were like, Akash fixes this. Like Akash was trending on Twitter and all that stuff, right? It's amazing people think, but again, people, this whole token holders going and shilling your project is great, but I think there needs to be a level of intellectual honesty, right? To build a really high scale decentralized solution is very, very hard. So instead of using the term X fixes Y, I would hope that people will have a lot more sort of intellectual conversations. And this whole educational piece of Akash and decentralized cloud in general is a very technical product set, right? How do you explain such a heavy technical product to not so technical user base? I think is going to be a huge challenge. And when people make claims that Akash fixes or Firebase fixes or any X fixes Y, we come off as not sophisticated products, right? So I think in the mainstream, when they're looking at it, they just get disgusted, right? So there's this mainstream, people not taking cloud seriously is because there's just a lot of noise on Twitter. So we had to battle that as well, right? So I wish there was less shilling and more intellectual honesty in our community for mainstream acceptance of decentralized products in general.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one, actually. Building tools and/or services for everyday users. I sometimes call this the grandma use case internally. Like if grandma can't use it, it's not going to go mainstream. And so, that's actually one of the reasons why kind of Firebase exists entirely. Is some of the networks we support, it is so cumbersome. There's so much technical complexity and hoops that one has to jump through just to store a hello world or README text file or something on this network of distributed computers all over the world. And as companies can build services and tools to streamline that process like we do, this is what's going to take Web3 and all of its associated projects and networks to the next level. I mean, another common thing I like to throw out there is 100 million people are not downloading the Bitcoin blockchain. They're downloading the Coinbase iOS app, right? And they're opening it and they're buying and selling crypto through Coinbase. So Coinbase is like the ultimate layer 2 aggregator of coins to buy and sell crypto. We're doing that for decentralized storage, and Akash is very much doing something similar for compute. And it's really these tools that kind of bring people together, make it easy to use.
Awesome. Let's talk on that note, as far as the difficulty of building these platforms and the struggle to make sure that there are at least a shared vocabulary so you can have that conversation with that level of honesty needed to discuss where there are opportunities and all, and need to build and need to improve and all the rest. What do you think about standards and best practices for the decentralized cloud? We have our standards, right, in Web 2. We have our standards in Web 1 that Web 2 is built on top of, and it seems like these are layers, not so much like a brand new phase, but layers where you're building on top of older standards in some cases. Is there a need to slash and burn? Do we need to start from scratch in some cases? What does that look like with what you're building?
No, we're not scratching. We're not starting from scratch. Like, we're actually building on shoulders of giants, right? Like, Akash is not a protocol that's built from scratch. It is a decentralized cloud marketplace, right? So you're essentially, the compute is coming from a provider somewhere. So it's built on existing cloud infrastructure. Heck, it could be an Equinix, or it could be before Hetzner was actually. There was some supply that was coming from Hetzner. It could be Google, it could be Microsoft, it could be Amazon. It doesn't really matter. The point is to create a homogeneous layer on a heterogeneous provider set. So you can have the abstraction when it comes to fault tolerance and scheduling and orchestration and identity management and all the stuff that you normally expect from a cloud provider. You can have that at a higher level, so you're not locked into a single provider, right? And you can leverage the best provider that gives you the best price and the best attributes you're looking for. So we are standing on top of giants. I mean, Akash Foundational is built on something called Kubernetes, which became like a de facto, container orchestration standard, right?
Right, at scale, yeah.
So it's not we're not building from scratch. It's a layer on top of other protocols that are built, and it's a protocol, right? So you can build other stuff on top of Akash. And most of the adoption, I would think, would come from verticalization, right? So Akash is a general purpose cloud. So that means it's meant to do everything, but not great to do any one single thing. So okay. What that means is, like, it's really good to do. You can do. It's got so much freedom, but but you need to really know how to use it. It's like taking an F1 car to buy groceries. So it's like very hard to drive, right? But it's very powerful. So I would imagine you would build additional verticals on top of it that optimize for single use cases. And we, Overclock Labs as a company, are building some verticals. There are about 7 different companies working on building different protocol clients on top of Akash, all having a different flavor. In Firebase, at some point, you guys were considering compute as well, an aggregator, right? So I think a lot of the Firebase obviously makes it extremely simple for scheduling your storage, especially when you have so many options on decentralized cloud storage. They provide a vertically integrated solution for ease of use. So I would imagine most of the usage will come from that.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, so and then as far as standards go, and it's either slash and burn. I mean, again, there are some of these things that you have to shoehorn certain points of access and whatever else into, but what does that look like for Firebase?
Yeah, standards are absolutely important, especially when it comes to web development. We have really taken that to the extreme. So the entire idea from Firebase came about years ago when I tried to store data on the Saya network. And to do that, you have to download the Saya blockchain, which is about 30 gigs right now. That's done peer-to-peer, so it's going to take you a while if you have a hard drive. And then beyond that, you got to acquire Saya coin, create contracts, and that whole process, you're 24, 36 hours in, again, just to store one file. And so we kind of said to ourselves, hey, can we streamline this process and make it easy? And if we make it easy, how are people going to interface with our service or platform to actually store and retrieve data? And so we looked at the different standards out there, and we pretty much settled instantly on the Amazon S3 compatible API. And so if anybody's ever built an application in any Amazon Web Services, DigitalOcean, you name it, you've likely worked with object storage before. If you think you haven't worked with object storage or Amazon S3 before, if you've watched Netflix, you use S3. All data for Netflix is stored on S3. And so S3 is simple storage service from Amazon, second service they launched in 2006. And it's kind of the de facto gold standard of cloud native object storage APIs today. And so Amazon launched S3 in 2006, published the full length API specification and standards of how they operate their service. and then everybody from Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, Oracle, you name it, they all have S3 compatible APIs. And so you have larger clouds like Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. You also have one-off players that run centralized storage offerings like Wasabis and Backblazes of the world. But the key point here is they're all standardized on the S3 compatible API. So that's exactly what we did. And so on Firebase, you can create an IPFS bucket, you can create a SIA bucket, and regardless of what bucket or data the network is going on, it's all S3 compatible. So now you have a scenario where Web3 technologies, and we're adding more networks as we go, of course, all these newer Web3 technologies, which don't have any standardized APIs necessarily on the storage side, they all now have a standardization through a file-based layer, right? And so this opens up possibilities where out of the box, you can use Web3 storage with 15 or 17,000 plus SDKs, application tools, frameworks. I mean, all the way from Node.js weekend JavaScript developer up to like enterprise Veeam, Commvault, MSP enterprise backup software. So it kind of runs the gamut, and that kind of, that's by standardizing on that's API standard, has really opened the door for kind of Web3 gates to kind of overflow a bit.
That's awesome. I think some people would say, okay, well, that's Web 2.5, and you're not really innovating, and but it seems like such a pragmatic thing, like it's totally necessary.
It's absolutely necessary. If anyone's a fan of NFTs, nearly every NFT, at least for a period of time, was stored using a centralized server, right? And so you'd open up the metadata as NFT, you'd have an HTTP link. If Amazon or whatever the web server that's addressed to goes down, then your NFT is now gone, and now we call it a rug pull, right? And so using protocols like IPFS and a planetary file system, being able to kind of pin data, but maybe that person does not want to have their laptop running 24/7, they need possibly a middleman or that 2.5 layer to keep their data online and available, but they don't necessarily have to go through that provider to do it. They can go to the IPFS network directly themselves or the SIA network directly themselves and fetch that data. The same thing holds true for Arweave. The same thing is true for Filecoin. I think we're going to see more of these services. Certainly, we've seen some more on our radar. But again, going back to the Coinbase grandma use case, if everyday users can't do it and they can't drag and drop and do it, it's never going to catch on. So these middle layers are absolutely required for ease of use.
That's great. So I'm kind of curious then, there's clearly a need for innovation, right, in some of these areas, and with standards, there may be a need for new standards to be created. Clearly, it seems like with object storage, probably not, right? You're just going to be yet another orphan in this decentralized cloud space, trying to fight for your standard to just not be adopted and 5 years from now run out of runway. So
yeah, possibility. The one thing I would also chime in on that is we have a saying internally, every Web3 developer was previously a Web2 developer in a previous life. And so they're going to bring those standards that they're used to over into their new light when they're looking to build a new app, whether it be a decentralized application or what have you. So we think they will be around to stay, at least for a while, on the storage front too.
Awesome. So I'm interested in having that aspirational conversation, though. I mean, this is Web3. This is cryptocurrency. We're allowed to be kind of renegades here. And if you can't be here, then I don't know why you're in crypto. But I'm interested in, where is the opportunity for the new standards to be created? Is there one? Is there a need?
I think every abstraction is creating its own standard, right? Like, for example, like even Akash was built on Kubernetes and as a foundation, but it's a new standard altogether. It's a new interface that's being adopted by other systems. So we are essentially, a protocol is a new set of standards, right? And it's by doing a protocol, I think you're already creating that. I don't think we had to go out of the way. And a lot of the interfaces, like, so for storage, what Joshua was talking about, yes, they have a beautiful S3 standard. S3 is a global standard for object storage, right? Like any API that's doing object storage, I think needs to have S3 because the ecosystem is so mature, and S3 is the first Amazon product, right? So it's been around for 15 years. So if you were to attract a Web2 developer by introducing a new standard, that standard has to be a radically improved version. And storage is commodities, right? So you're not introducing a new standard to improve a commodity. You can introduce a new standard that offers additional value through maybe through additional value, right, to productizing a commodity, but you can't just put a new standard on top of a commodity and expect people to adopt, right?
Sure, yeah. And to be fair, some people would say that compute cores and RAM are a commodity too in today's world.
Yeah, and to show you how this goes back and forth, all of the APIs, databases, infrastructure layers that we run, it's all on bare metal hardware servers and various data centers around the world, but it's all running on top of Kubernetes as an orchestration platform layer, which Akash is largely built on top of, right? And so standards, we adopt them internally ourselves when building things. So they're definitely around here to stay.
Correct. So like for us, like to attract compute providers, if you go create our own like orchestration engine or like, you know, scheduling, which we don't have to because there's already amazing Kubernetes, right? So that means there's a whole like barrier for adoption. So I think creating new standards, you got to ask yourself, what are you improving radically? Like, yes, a marketplace needed a new standard, but because there was no marketplace before. So we created the Akash marketplace as a new standard from a tenant standpoint, but from a provider standpoint, there's not much to innovate there. I mean, except for like adding new features like IP addresses and storage, yeah, we had to do work there. But we're not fundamentally changing Kubernetes, we are adding to Kubernetes.
Yeah, and to push that a little further too, I think storage standards are pretty firm, at least in the Web 2 world. Same would go for Akash with, you know, kind of Kubernetes, you know, winning the Docker swarm wars. I think identity is a standard in the Web 3 space that we'll see evolve, and there's a few projects working on that that I think be very interesting to kind of continue to follow and see how those can be intertwined and link with computing, storage products, and networks moving forward.
We're working on one too, so.
Yeah, it sounds like though, but what I'm hearing from both of you is that when that nut is cracked finally, it will still need to have typical sort of access standards that it conforms to in order to make sure that the web continues operational into Web 3.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we're a couple minutes out. Let me just ask both of you just really quickly, because first off, audience, these are some pretty sharp gentlemen, pretty sharp individuals. Give them a round of applause right now before we finish up. Yeah. But wait, there's more. Lightning round. What are some trends that you see coming up? I think most people here would agree. I view you both as visionaries and as working towards something that's better. What do you see coming down the pike?
The new trends, I feel like AI, generative art, and Web3. There's this sexual tension between generative art and Web3 that is still like, it's just looming around, right? And we're going on with super high support for generative art on AI and Akash, so look out for it. But I think, I don't know if you played around with any of these like avatar apps, but I highly recommend you do so. You can generate a whole NFT series in a matter of hours using AI. So I think you're going to see evolution in terms of NFTs and how AI is going to influence that when you have like art pretty much a commodity with like GPUs at this point, right? So that's a new trend that I'm really excited about. And second big trend that's taking a center stage, mostly from the Ethereum world, is really interoperability. Interoperability has been on the back burner for the longest term, but with Cosmos IBC showing that yes, you can have a highly interoperable, high-performance network that's very, very secure. And we have like hundreds of chains now that are interoperating on the IBC standard from Cosmos. That's taking a center stage. I think Cosmos is one of those ecosystems that haven't been like exposed heavily in the last bull run, but now that things are a lot more silent and things are, there's a shift of focus towards protocols that are actually delivering. So I would keep an eye out for Cosmos and interoperability as a trend. Yeah, those are my two picks.
Awesome.
The two trends for me, I would say first, artificial intelligence, like Greg said, for sure. I'm a huge car guy, and I love following the progress of some of these, vehicle self-driving systems, and that's, largely AI and neural net driven. So I think that's something to keep our eyes on. I think the second trend, I don't know if that's a great term to use for this, but I think that the second trend we're going to start to see is actually a lot of projects start to be looked at a bit more closely in regards to what value they actually provide, right? And so that's one of the reasons why I really got into decentralized storage, was that this is a coin or token that can be used to actually store and retrieve data, and same could be held true for Akash. And there's a lot of white papers floating around out there that never really deliver, and I think we're going to start to see some of those projects fade by the wayside. And those are, largely decentralized projects, but we do sit 3 or 4 blocks from FTX Arena here. So I think people are starting to wake up a little bit into regards to like what people are actually building and does this actually contribute some way to society.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Round of applause for Decentralized Cloud panelists. Thank you so much for your time.